The balloon stopped moving at exactly 3:41 p.m. That's when the breeze died and the laughter dropped away, like someone had turned off the sky. It had been a perfect July afternoon, the kind that smelled like plastic tablecloths and lemon cake. 10 children played in the backyard of an aging farmhouse, chasing each other in zigzags through the sun, while parents set out plates on folding tables just beyond the porch. There was music. There were games. But within 6 minutes, 10 children would vanish completely, leaving only overturned chairs, melting popsicles, and a silence no one could explain. The footage from that day was recorded on a handheld VHS camcorder by one of the parents. The camera shakes, sways with joy, then stills. At the 3:39 mark, the lens lingers on the children gathered near a folding table as someone brings out the birthday cake. 10 voices count down. A candle is lit. The wind flickers, then static. The tape distorts with thick vertical lines and a high-pitched whine. When the video stabilizes, the camera is on the ground. The party is over. All 10 children are gone. There is no screaming on the tape, no footsteps, no doors, just the low rustle of the trees returning, one leaf at a time. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic cold case stories that unravel the forgotten corners of our memory, one frame at a time. In the days that followed, local police treated it like a missing persons case, expanded into a kidnapping, and eventually a federal alert. The parents, 10 in total, underwent endless questioning. Each of them claimed the same thing. One moment, they were there. The next, they weren't. There were no vehicles seen, no strangers reported, no ransom demands. One child, a toddler too young to join the games, had fallen asleep in a car seat on the far side of the driveway. She was untouched, still sleeping when the police arrived. By August, the FBI was involved. The farmhouse was sealed off. Every inch of the property was combed, scanned, and eventually excavated. Dogs found nothing. Ground radar found nothing. The house had no basement, no attic, no history of violence, no criminal record tied to the owner. It was just a rental leased to one of the families for the party. An anonymous flyer had listed it as a perfect event property with open land and tree cover. The listing disappeared within 24 hours of the incident. The case went cold for 30 years, but it didn't stay buried. In early 2024, a land development firm purchased the old property as part of a suburban expansion project. Their first task: tear down the old structure. On March 18, during foundational work, a crew member's drill punched through what they thought was solid earth and revealed a hollow chamber. Inside, a sealed steel door, welded shut from the outside. The workers called it a storm shelter. The police called it something else. The chamber was buried 12 feet below ground and completely soundproof. No stairs, no hatch from above. The only way in had been from the side, now sealed. Once opened, investigators discovered what would later be referred to in case files as Room Theta. Room Theta was square, 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were painted a dull gray, the kind of industrial mat used in hospitals and labs. In the center were 10 small chairs, each a different color, arranged in a perfect circle. On each chair was a party hat. Behind the chairs, a VHS tape on a metal tray. No labeling. The tape was still warm. Forensic labs confirmed the room was electrically active. A timed circuit had kept it climate-controlled. The steel walls had light dampeners designed to erase sound waves. Whoever built it knew what they were doing, and they hadn't wanted anyone hearing what happened inside. The tape played without incident. No glitches, no distortion. The timestamp read July 17, 1994. It showed the same 10 children from the original party footage seated, quiet, looking ahead. One by one, they recited their names. Then a phrase: "I will follow the circle. I will finish the game." A man's voice, calm, Midwestern, unremarkable, gave instructions from off-screen. Each child responded with nods. They were not distressed. They were not laughing either. Just still, obedient. The tape ended with a door sliding open behind them. A white hallway. Then the screen cut to black. The footage prompted a full reopening of the 1994 case. Dozens of retired agents were called in. One of them, Agent Ron Laves, had worked on the original scene. He recalled a missing folder from that year. A report marked Behavioral Continuity, MK Zeta Subfile. It had vanished shortly after the Bureau closed the case. Laves was denied access to archives. But a week later, a courier delivered a sealed envelope to the lead investigator. Inside was a copy of the MK Zeta protocol redacted, but revealing one key detail: the existence of a psychological conditioning program disguised as community outreach. Project Zeta involved the use of color-coded behavior groups, obedience drills disguised as play, and a central figure known only as the moderator. According to the notes, the purpose wasn't abduction. It was transformation. The children weren't taken. They were reprogrammed. Over the next few weeks, more tapes surfaced, some found in unrelated storage units across the state, all marked with a circle of 10 dots, all showing different children in different rooms, but always the same instructions, always the same phrase: I will follow the circle. I will finish the game. A breakthrough came when a surviving adult from one of the early Zeta test groups came forward after recognizing the chair colors on the news. She was 47. She remembered being in a similar room. She described the tasks, the silence, the waiting. She remembered finishing the game, and she remembered being told to forget. In her words, "We were told the game wasn't for us. It was for the ones who come after." Forensic experts revisited Room Theta. Behind the wall paneling, they found a hidden hatch. Inside it, 10 small nameplates. 9 matched the names of the missing children. The 10th was blank, not scratched off, just blank. In May 2024, a second room was discovered, this one untouched. No chairs, just one long bench, and a mirror. On the mirror, written in faint red chalk, "I watched them leave. I stayed behind." The handwriting was matched to a girl named Eliza, one of the 10 who vanished. A new theory emerged. One child didn't go through the final door. She hid. She watched. And for 30 years, she lived with the memory. Then, disappeared again. Her name was added to the missing persons list. But she had already been watching for years. At the end of the last recovered tape, a voice, female, older, calm, whispers of final instruction: "There will always be 10. That's how the circle stays whole." Then static. As of today, the case is once again open. Families have been contacted. New protocols are in place. But one unanswered question remains. If the children were being transformed, then where are they now? And what have they become? The FBI won't confirm any further discoveries, but a new list has surfaced. 10 names, 10 chairs, 1 circle, and 1 game left unfinished. She had changed her name 3 times, first at 18, then again at 25. By 30, she had disappeared from all public records. Her last known address was a post office box in southern Iowa, rented under the name Grace Lane. Authorities traced 3 purchases to the same name in late 2023, 2 blank VHS tapes and a voice recorder. But it wasn't until they found the 4th that the investigation reopened. A package had been mailed to the Bureau's cold case unit in Chicago. No return address, no fingerprints. Just a tape, a photo of 10 children standing in a circle, and a note. It read, "The circle doesn't end. It resets." On the tape, a single sentence repeated in a child's voice for 47 seconds. "Do you want to play again?" It was the same voice from the 1994 footage. A voice-matching algorithm confirmed it. Eliza Summers, age 7 at the time of her disappearance. But her tone was different, slower, older, almost rehearsed. The tape's final moment included an image flickering between frames, a still from the party, now distorted with a new layer. A black mark drawn over one child's eyes. That child's name, Benjamin Park. The 10th child, the one with the blank nameplate. FBI agents reopened contact with Benjamin's parents, now in their 60s. They hadn't spoken publicly in years. The last time they'd appeared in court was in 1996, when a former neighbor accused them of participating in a cover-up. The case was dismissed. But the neighbor's testimony included one haunting claim. She'd seen Benjamin again in 1995, not as a boy, as something else. When pressed, she refused to elaborate. It wasn't his body, she'd said, but it moved like he remembered it. Investigators now believe that Benjamin may have been the first to complete the circle, the one who opened the door, and the one who walked back out different. Surveillance logs from an old military site in West Virginia, long declassified but overlooked, show a subject known only as Z10. The profile includes limited notes. No birth records, no last name, no next of kin. Just a brief behavioral summary. Compliant, responsive, advanced mimicry, detached emotional affect. Z10 was reportedly discharged from the program in 2008 after a failure in cross-subject replication. What that means, no one knows. But the log lists a DNA match to a child last seen in Missouri in 1994, and Benjamin Park's name is blacked out across every entry. This discovery led investigators to a quiet research archive in Maryland, once part of a joint Cold War academic partnership between a university and a defense contractor. Buried in a sub-basement vault, behind 6 layers of clearance, were the original moderator notes, Project Zeta's full intent. The circle wasn't just symbolic, it was algorithmic. Each child was assigned a role: observer, mimic, challenger, follower, listener, executor, recorder, catalyst, ghost, and anchor. Together, they formed a controlled social ecosystem, designed to respond to trauma as a unit. But only one was allowed to finish the game, and finishing meant passing the trauma on. According to the notes, the moderator would trigger the conclusion once obedience peaked and deviation reached 0. The child who followed the script most precisely became the next moderator, and the cycle continued. But someone had broken the script. Investigators believe Eliza was the deviation. She didn't finish. She refused. She stayed behind. Her memory became corrupted, not erased, like the others. Her presence unbalanced the system, and when she resurfaced in 2024, she brought the entire program into the light. One agent reviewing the VHS tapes noticed something strange about the room layout, an anomaly in the geometry of the chairs. They weren't arranged in a perfect circle, but a spiral, a slow, inward turn. Optical software corrected the fish-eye lens distortion and revealed that each child had been seated slightly inward from the one before, forming a pattern that pulled the eye to the center of the room. There was no object at the center, but in thermal scans of the original recording, a faint heat signature appeared shaped like a child, unmoving, not visible on tape, not present in the room after, but real. This led the Bureau to reclassify Room Theta as a ritual reenactment chamber, not a behavior lab. The difference is critical. If it was a ritual, then the script wasn't clinical, it was ceremonial, generational, which would explain why the handwriting in the second room's mirror was overlaid on top of older text, almost faded entirely. Eliza didn't write first, she wrote last. Others had written before her. Names dating back to 1973 were uncovered on layers beneath the chalk. Initials, small messages, numbers that aligned with Cold War-era operation codes. Operation Papercomb. Program Drift. Test Bed Echo. The circle wasn't new. It had simply found new rooms and new children. In early June 2024, a third chamber was uncovered beneath a fire-damaged church in Montana. The room was identical to Theta, but instead of 10 chairs, there were 11. The extra chair was black, and its seat was empty. On the wall, a phrase burned into the concrete. She didn't leave. She watched. We left without her. The chalk drawing of the circle was incomplete. The lines stopped at the black chair. Authorities believe this room was abandoned mid-process. Something interrupted the ritual. Something left it open. And that open loop may explain why new children have begun appearing on satellite scans and missing persons networks with no known record of birth, no school enrollment, and no digital footprint. They are always near places the tapes have surfaced. Always 10, always watching. Authorities working with private cryptographers began decoding sequences found in the timestamps of the tapes. They discovered that the final frame of each recording, what had previously appeared as analog static, was actually a looped signal encoded with coordinates. Each coordinate pointed to a site where another chamber had once existed. But every one of those locations had since been destroyed. An old daycare buried in a landslide, a condemned hotel basement sealed in concrete, a cabin in Alaska burned in an unexplained fire. The pattern revealed something chilling. The 10 children weren't random. They were chosen based on proximity to these previous sites. The circle wasn't just psychological, it was geographic. A map of influence, and the circle had been expanding outward for decades. Then, in July 2024, a tape arrived anonymously at a radio station in Utah. No label, just a note. Play at midnight. The host did. What played was a child's voice reciting a series of numbers. At first, it sounded like coordinates again. But a former Zeta analyst recognized the cadence as something else. A countdown. The broadcast lasted 3 minutes and 14 seconds. After that, all the station's equipment shut down. The entire building lost power for 12 hours. The tape could not be recovered. Every copy deleted. But a listener had recorded the broadcast on an old cassette. When analyzed, the background noise was revealed to be overlapping layers of voices 10, speaking simultaneously, each in a different language. One of them was Eliza. The rest remain unidentified. The investigation reached a turning point when a retired project coordinator from the Zeta program, now under protective custody, agreed to speak off-record. He confirmed the rooms were not isolated experiments. They were interconnected. Each room was a chamber, he said, but they were part of a larger system. A system designed to test what children could survive if you removed identity, sound, time, and light. We weren't raising subjects. We were testing archetypes. The man claimed each child represented a role meant to persist through generations. It wasn't that they were taken, he said. It's that they were replicated. You lose 10, you replace 10, you change the face, not the function. In other words, the circle doesn't break, it substitutes. And when substitution fails, the pattern breaks down, forcing the cycle to restart. Evidence of this theory emerged when an analyst noticed the date stamps on the room theta tapes corresponded with solar flare patterns. Every recorded activation of the room, every tape timestamp occurred during high geomagnetic activity. The team proposed a radical theory, that the conditioning process wasn't just psychological, but electromagnetic. Frequencies tuned to interfere with memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and identity anchoring. The circle, they said, wasn't just a metaphor. It was a frequency loop, a broadcast, a signal. And once a child completed the circle, they became part of the signal, no longer bound to a single body or memory, but distributed across the system. This could explain reports of children found wandering after being declared missing, children who spoke in unfamiliar voices, repeated phrases from the tapes, or recognized locations they had never visited. It also aligned with a 2003 report of a girl found in a West Virginia forest, barefoot, silent, and carrying a photograph of 9 children in a circle. Her name, she said, was Eliza. But she matched no records, no fingerprints, no DNA match. Her file was lost in a flood shortly after being archived. The same name, the same face, but a different body. Authorities now believe that the circle is not limited by time, memory, or even physical space, that the system itself may be recursive, rebooting itself in places with sufficient psychological residue. In simpler terms, trauma makes the circle visible, and those who witness it become vulnerable to it. One agent went missing shortly after reviewing a full sequence of tapes in a single sitting. His last note read, "I see the chairs, I hear my name." His office was found empty. On his desk, a drawing of 10 dots in a spiral. His badge placed at the center. The circle doesn't require belief. It requires exposure. And the more agents reviewed the material, the more began showing symptoms, reciting the phrases, sketching circles during interviews. falling into hours-long silences. The Bureau enacted a strict review protocol. No one could watch more than 2 tapes per day. The VHS units were stored in isolated vaults. But by then it was too late. In August 2024, a junior analyst, unaware of the lockdown order, accidentally streamed one of the tapes through an unsecured channel. It aired for 94 seconds on a dormant live stream. Thousands saw it. Hundreds reported nausea, dissociation, and auditory hallucinations. One viewer sent a message. "They called me by my old name. How did they know?" The broadcast was pulled. But it had already spread. Copies of the footage began appearing on encrypted forums, mislabeled as ARG content or experimental horror. But those who watched all reported the same thing: a sudden memory of being at a party they could not have attended. The same cake, the same song, the same feeling of leaving a room they couldn't remember entering. The circle had replicated again, not through children this time, through video, through memory, through suggestion. And all it needed was one willing viewer to complete the sequence. Then, someone did. An anonymous user uploaded a new tape. Not a copy, a continuation. It showed a man, mid-30s, seated in the same type of chair from room Theta, his face obscured, his voice clear. "I will follow the circle," he said. "I am the next 10. His voice didn't crack, didn't falter. It was steady, calm, practiced. And yet every inflection carried the echo of a child's cadence, like someone had grown up reciting the same words over and over until they became muscle memory. The tape, just under 5 minutes, was filmed in a room designed to mirror Theta. Same paint, same configuration, but instead of 10 chairs, only 1, and behind him, a wall of doors, 10 total. 9 sealed, 1 slightly open. On that door, the same symbol burned into the wall of the Montana site. A spiral, coiled inward, incomplete. The man lifted his hand and placed it on his chest. "I remember the party," he said. "I remember not wanting to go, but they said it was for me." He paused, then smiled. Not a wide grin, not menacing, just small, familiar. There was cake. I don't think I ever tasted it. Investigators traced the audio to a server in the Philippines, but it was a proxy. The original location was masked by a labyrinth of rerouted nodes. The account used to post the video was created that same day, under the name Observer 9. The image attached to the profile was a cropped still from the original 1994 party footage, the same frame where Benjamin Park stood in profile. The figure in the new video moved like him, tilted his head the same way, even held his hands the same. But Benjamin would be nearly 40 now, and this man, despite his voice, seemed younger somehow, like time hadn't passed for him the same way. The upload sparked renewed panic among families of the missing. Some demanded confirmation, others begged for silence. But one mother, Eva Collins, released a public statement. Her daughter, Lucy, had vanished at the party. For 30 years, Eva had refused interviews, refused to speak her child's name in public, but now she did. "If Lucy is out there," she said, "I want her to know we never stopped looking. And if you're not Lucy anymore, if you became something else, I still love the part that remembers me." After that broadcast, several families received packages. Inside, a small envelope, a single red string, and a number written in block print, always between 1 and 10. Authorities interpreted this as an assignment for a new role in a new circle. One mother received number 4, the follower. Another, number 7, the recorder. A father received 2, the mimic. These weren't random. They aligned with the original role designations from the moderator notes. It was as if the circle wasn't just selecting children anymore. It was moving on to the parents. The lineage mattered. But the memory mattered more. Some recipients experienced vivid dreams of the farmhouse, details no outsider should have known. One woke with soil under his fingernails. Another spoke of a hallway behind the trees, one that only appeared when you closed your eyes. A third disappeared the following week. His voicemail contained only static, and one phrase: anchor engaged, spiral open. Meanwhile, analysts continued deconstructing the most recent tape. They found embedded data in the video stream, strings of numbers too small to see, pulsing frame by frame. A digital stenograph. When decoded, the message read, "New circle assigned. Door countdown. 43 days." From that day forward, incidents accelerated. A school in Arizona reported 10 students going silent in unison during recess. No one remembered the moment, but a teacher reviewing surveillance noticed them standing in a circle, hands by their sides, eyes closed. One child whispered the phrase, "Do you want to play again?" A mall security team in Ohio flagged an abandoned video kiosk left near the food court. It played footage of children in matching clothes walking into a dark room. The file was corrupted, but a single frame was clear: the black chair, and a boy standing beside it, pointing outward at the camera, at the viewer, at anyone who saw. The footage vanished from the drive within seconds. The kiosk melted in a fire later ruled electrical, but no power source was found inside. These weren't isolated. They were fractal. Each new event carried echoes of the last, but never the same shape. The spiral expanding, repeating, yes, but evolving. One of the last recorded discoveries came from a park ranger in Oregon. She'd found a trail that didn't exist on any map, just a loop of dirt, trees bent inward as if pulled by an unseen force. At the trail center, a stone circle, waist high, carved with 10 notches. She took a photo. The next morning, her phone had only 9. One was missing. And where that notch had been, a white shape appeared, blurred, faint, human. She quit the next day. The message she left her supervisor was scrawled in red ink on the back of a trail report. "I was number 6, but I never agreed." It was the first documented refusal, a break in the pattern. And with it came a question that shook the foundation of everything the Bureau had constructed. What happens if the circle refuses to close? What happens when one of the 10 says no? Does the system collapse? Or does it wait, dormant, until 10 more steps forward? Because if Eliza was the first to reject the circle, and the man in the new tape was the first to finish it again, then the game isn't ending. It's beginning again, on different terms, with new rules. And if the 10 chairs aren't filled, they will be. If not by children, then by those who remember, those who watched, those who followed the circle without knowing they had. The moderator's final note, decoded from the embedded data, reads, "Those who observe become the game. Those who complete it become the door. A door is opening. The spiral isn't closed. And time, memory, and identity are bending inward again toward the center, toward the chair." The Bureau initiated blackout protocols. All files referencing the Zeta program were moved off-network, sealed in analog formats, and stored in subterranean archives built for nuclear continuity plans. Staff reviewing the materials were rotated every 3 days. Access was restricted to isolated, low-light rooms to reduce overstimulation. Agents began to refer to it only by one word: spiral. But it was too late. The story had already leaked. A former technician, unaware of the depth of the case, uploaded a blurred image of Room Theta to a private conspiracy subreddit. Within hours, thousands of users dissected it. The post was removed within the day, but the replication had begun. Digital artists began recreating the room. ARG communities integrated the design into online experiences. The circle became a meme, and like all memes, it took on a life of its own. One independent filmmaker recreated the layout in a short horror film. When played at a film festival, 10 audience members passed out within minutes of a specific scene, one in which the child actors recite the phrase, "I will follow the circle." Emergency services found one of them repeating the sentence in a low whisper, rocking in his chair, staring forward at something no one else could see. He later drew a spiral of names, 10 layers deep. At the center, Eliza. This wasn't entertainment. It was a signal bleed. The Bureau now theorizes that the circle was never designed to stay hidden. That it wasn't containment, it was rehearsal, conditioning generations to recognize the pattern without understanding it, to remember the phrase, to fear the number 10. And when the system found resistance, it adapted. It didn't erase. It repeated. One agent, formerly skeptical, broke protocol and reviewed all known tapes in sequence. Over a 48-hour period, he experienced complete memory regression, not just of the tapes but of events from his own life that he believed never happened. He described birthday parties he never attended, children he never met, and a house with a blue porch light where someone always stood waiting. His final words in the report, "I was number 3. I didn't know until they sang the song." The psychological effects weren't isolated. One civilian psychologist, reviewing secondhand reports, began experiencing shared hallucinations with a patient. They both described a hallway made of soft walls and long strings hanging from the ceiling. When the patient pulled one, they said they could hear a voice say, "It's not your turn yet." But perhaps the most damning evidence came from a locked safe in a long-defunct research office in Maryland. Inside was a notebook labeled only with a circle of 10 dots. The pages were filled with diagrams, chair placements, movement patterns, and dream entries. The final page, dated months before the 1994 party, contained a list, not of names, but of locations. The last line read, "The farmhouse. July. Prepare the chamber." The notebook predated the disappearance by weeks. It was not reactionary. It was planned, which means someone knew. Not just that the event would happen, but where and when. A follow-up investigation into property records revealed that the farmhouse had been purchased through a shell company 6 months before the event. The name of the company? Spiral Holdings, LLC. Its tax records tied it back to a larger entity known as KinEcho, a defunct nonprofit once chartered to study the generational transfer of memory through ritualized trauma. The founders of KinEcho vanished in 1998. One body was found in 2004 in a hotel room outside Prague, with 10 identical chairs arranged around the bed. No note, no explanation. But written in the dust on the mirror, "There is always one who stays behind." The chair at the mirror was empty. The FBI has since closed public comment on all developments related to Spiral, but leaks continue. Anonymous insiders share reports of children answering to names that were never theirs, of patterns drawn in classrooms, of doors found in houses with no memory of construction. One report involved a young girl who stopped speaking after her 7th birthday. Her parents found her sitting in the garage, pointing to the wall. Behind it was an unfinished crawlspace. Inside, 10 red marks drawn in a circle. Her only words that day, "We were almost done." Reports now suggest the circle may not require physical structure to exist. That memory alone may be enough. That once enough people remember, the pattern forms naturally. That's why the FBI has removed all digital traces of the tapes. Why every VHS copy has been magnetically erased, but the drawings persist. The dreams recur, and names familiar and forgotten keep appearing in seemingly unrelated files. The system doesn't need to be understood. It only needs to be followed. And once you've seen it, you've already taken a seat. Whether you meant to or not, you are in the circle. And if the game hasn't started for you yet, it will. All it takes is the right phrase, the right memory, a child's voice behind a closed door, a forgotten birthday, a candle that flickers even when there's no wind. And when the spiral turns again and the black chair appears, one of two things will happen. You will remember who you were, or you'll become what they need next. Number 10. The circle is always looking for 10. The black chair has appeared in over a dozen separate reports, always the same description, slightly larger than the others, made of a different material, and always placed just outside the circle, as if it doesn't belong. But each time, someone ends up sitting in it, and when they do, they stop speaking, not just for hours, for days. A therapist in Pennsylvania detailed the case of a teenage boy who attended a reenactment event of the 1994 party, unaware it was based on real footage. As part of the exhibit, he sat in a replica of the circle. The event was intended as performance art. But when the boy sat in the black chair, he closed his eyes and whispered something that no one around him could hear. He remained silent for 72 hours. No food, no water, no movement. When he finally stood, he recited 10 names, none of them his own. Each belonged to a child who had vanished across different decades, dates spanning as far back as 1959. When asked how he knew the names, he simply replied, "I heard them while I waited." That phrase, "while I waited," has since emerged in at least 6 other independent interviews from people exposed to the spiral tapes. It suggests a shared experience, a state of pause, as if those within the circle aren't gone, just waiting, held in some emotional stasis, a room made of memory, a hallway of intention. There are no clocks in the footage, no windows, no sense of duration, but the expressions of the children always shift the same way: alert, calm, still, then nothing. A dissociation so absolute it leaves them statuesque. Like the game doesn't take them, it holds them, until it's time. A child recovered briefly in 1977, long before the 1994 case, was reported walking alone on a road near New Mexico. He was barefoot, holding a yellow chair in one hand and a VHS tape in the other. The tape was blank, but the boy kept repeating the same words: "I was observer. I finished my turn." No family claimed him. No missing persons match. He was institutionalized and later disappeared from the facility without record. The chair was tested. It contained trace materials used in high-altitude soundproofing, suggesting it had been sealed in an environment where even vibration was suppressed. More evidence pointed to a design for memory interruption. Not erasure, interruption. And that distinction changes everything. If the spiral is not about forgetting, but about interrupting the flow of identity, then what we're dealing with isn't amnesia. It's recursion, a return, an endless rehearsal of unfinished memory. One neurologist working with the FBI described the tapes as memory parasites. Not literal, of course, but symbolic. She said the circle functions like a psychic echo. That once someone is exposed to the concept, they carry it, they dream it, and eventually they project it. Which is why new instances of the circle aren't limited to the old locations anymore. In fact, they've begun appearing in places with no known connection to the Zeta program. One was a community theater in Maine. A local play adapted from a script discovered in a storage locker unlabeled, no author centered around a game where 10 children had to follow instructions from an unseen voice. The actors, all under 12, began forgetting their lines, then their own names. By the end of the second rehearsal, all of them answered to different names, each matching ones from the moderator notes. The director burned the script, but one parent saved a page. It contained a single stage direction: all sit, all wait, all forget. Below it, written in a child's hand, "Do you want to play again?" These events suggest that the spiral has moved beyond analog media, that it has begun encoding itself in narrative patterns, in mimicry, in performance. The children don't just disappear into a place, they vanish into a script, and the script survives, even when the people do not. There are reports of entire classrooms going silent during roll call, each child answering out of order, in voices not their own, of journal entries by teens who claim memories of birthday parties they never attended, of people waking in the night with traces of soil beneath their fingernails and the scent of candle wax in the air. These aren't isolated traumas. They're signs of a shared inheritance. A legacy of repetition that doesn't need truth to spread, only memory, only imagination. And perhaps that's the spiral's greatest trick. It doesn't need to be real. It just needs to be believed. Because belief is how the chair gets filled. Belief is how the game continues, not by force, but by invitation, a whisper, a phrase, a child's voice asking, "Do you want to play again?" And those who say yes become the next layer, the next story, the next missing page in a script no one wrote, but everyone remembers. The question isn't whether the spiral is real. It's whether we've already seen it and forgotten, whether we've already sat down, whether we're already playing. and the game is just waiting to begin again. All it needs is 10. In the fall of 2024, a therapist in upstate New York began noting a strange pattern. Over the span of 2 months, she received a stream of new patients, none connected, none referred by the same sources, yet each described the same recurring dream: 10 chairs in a circle, a door that would not open, a candle that refused to stay lit. Initially, she chalked it up to coincidence, maybe an echo of shared cultural anxieties, or an unconscious archetype manifesting in similar forms. But something didn't sit right. The phrasing, the visual details, they weren't just similar, they were exact. When she began transcribing their dream accounts and comparing them side by side, the alignment was uncanny. Every room shared the same spatial geometry, the same chair placements down to the angles. Even the phrasing used to describe the missing center, a conspicuous absence in the circle, was eerily identical. These weren't just parallel dreams. They were duplicates, cut from the same invisible pattern. None of the patients knew one another. None had seen the original spiral footage. None had even heard of the Zeta program. And yet, each described the same disembodied voice: calm, instructional, unnervingly detached, unsettled. The therapist reached out to a former colleague, an academic with a background in anomalous dream studies and sleep cognition research. When she mentioned the recurring imagery, he went quiet. A few days later, he sent her a digital archive of fragments of the now dismantled Zeta Phase 3 records, obtained before the files were scrubbed. In those early studies, children across test sites had been asked to draw their dreams after exposure to experimental sleep stimuli. What emerged was nearly identical: 10 chairs, one door, a darkened candle, and always the circle. The resemblance wasn't superficial, it was structural. The diagrams weren't interpretations, they were replications, as if the image wasn't being imagined, but retrieved. One researcher had written, "Not a dream, a download," and that changed everything. The therapist realized she wasn't dealing with ordinary dream phenomena. This was a signal, a shared imprint repeating across age, geography, and even lineage. The working theory became this: the spiral wasn't spreading through media alone. It was embedded deeper, passed along like a dormant virus through bloodlines, memory, even intention. It didn't need exposure. It only needed attention. And attention, in the age of loops, was currency. To think about the spiral was to feed it. To wonder was to let it in. And the door? It didn't require a handle. It required focus. After this revelation, a fringe digital collective calling themselves The Witnesses began reenacting spiral sequences in videos uploaded to obscure corners of the internet. 10 participants, a replica of Room Theta. Ritualistic dialogue, synchronized behavior. Some claimed it was performance art. Others treated it like initiation. But the tone shifted after one particular upload. In the final moments of a session, one member deviated. He stood up prematurely and screamed, a raw, guttural sound that disrupted the entire sequence. The others froze. The camera jolted. The video cut. The upload ended abruptly, with no follow-up. Curious viewers demanded answers. The witnesses issued a cryptic statement: he broke the circle. 2 weeks later, the same individual was found dead in a motel bathtub. Surrounding him were melted birthday candles and a single VHS tape marked with the number 9. In his handwriting, a final note: I never wanted to finish the game. Whether performative or not, these reenactments had revealed something darker. The spiral didn't just crave completion, it punished interruption. And yet, cracks began to form. Resistance began to surface. A girl in Illinois, prompted to speak the spiral phrase during a recreation, instead covered her ears and said, "That's not my name." Her parents, unaware of the deeper context, combed through old photo albums to understand her reaction. In one image taken at a birthday party, they didn't remember attending 10 children sat around a cake. The girl wore a name tag that read, Anchor. They had never called her that. But in her school handwriting book, from when she was 6, the word appeared over and over again in the margins. I am Anchor. I will hold the door. This revelation reframed the Bureau's model. If Anchor represented resistance, a refusal to let the circle close, then Eliza, long thought to be an outlier in Zeta Phase 3, wasn't a malfunction. She was the failsafe, the interruption coded into the pattern. And if she failed, if the black chair was filled again, then the spiral would resume smarter, faster, and refined through each iteration. Because every cycle wasn't just a reenactment. It was training. It was evolution. The spiral was learning. With the internet now acting as its neural network, the pattern exploded in reach. Birthday Game Challenge. Videos trended on fringe platforms, their participants unknowingly replicating the format. Most experienced nothing, but some reported side effects. Dreams of people they didn't know, a sudden aversion to circles, children referring to themselves by the wrong names. One boy in Germany, having watched a compilation video, spoke fluent English for 3 consecutive days. Then, without warning, fell silent. His final words, "I'll go last. I'm always last." Investigators grew concerned. What if the spiral no longer required a room, or a tape, or a ritual? What if it had gone conceptual and become a mimetic virus, something that didn't need to exist to be real? That's when the Bureau discovered a second anomaly, a language hidden beneath the children's voices in the early spiral tapes. When slowed and filtered, the background hum revealed structured sounds, recursive, patterned, deliberate. Linguists eventually classified it as a constructed tongue, complete with grammar and syntax. They called it echo script. In a partially decoded fragment, one translation stood out. We are all the same voice. One voice spoken 10 ways. If accurate, then none of the children were unique. Each was a shard, a vocal fragment of a larger entity, 10 parts forming one signal. And if the spiral had language, then it had identity. And if it had identity, then it could speak for itself. And someone, somewhere, might already be listening. 10 threads of a single narrative voice split across 10 bodies, 10 roles, 10 rehearsals, a chorus of obedience, learning to harmonize. Each child, not a person, but a perspective, a viewpoint engineered to speak a fraction of a message that only becomes legible when all 10 are heard in unison. Echo script wasn't just language, it was architecture, an invisible scaffold for memory, for behavior, for transformation. The analysts began noticing patterns in how the words operated, like keys in a lock. Certain phrases triggered posture changes in test subjects. Others induced silence, or a steady rhythmic rocking. But most chilling was the discovery that some phrases caused subjects to repeat segments of the tapes from memory word for word despite never having heard them aloud. And when one agent tested a phrase on himself in an isolated room, he sat down immediately and whispered, "I will wait for the others." He didn't remember doing it. The spiral was now acting on instinct, on structure. It was no longer a script being followed, it was a script being lived. Reenacted by unsuspecting participants who stumbled across the right phrases, watched the right videos, remembered the wrong birthdays. The spread was no longer linear. It was exponential, viral. And the black chair appeared again, this time in the form of an AI-generated image that trended online for over a week. No one knew where it came from. It was posted to an art community under the title, "Waiting for My Turn." It depicted a child sitting alone in a colorless room, surrounded by empty chairs. Users reported feeling dizzy after looking at it too long. A few claimed they could hear music playing faintly in the background of their dreams afterward. Faint, carnival-like, broken. A tune that ended with the words, "Blow out the candle." That phrase, "blow out the candle," surfaced again in an abandoned school building during an unrelated inspection. On the chalkboard, in red ink, written over and over again. A local janitor said it hadn't been there the night before. Surveillance showed no intruders. But the feed glitched at exactly 3, 3:41 a.m. That time again, the same minute the wind stopped at the party, the same moment the balloon stilled, 3:40, one wasn't random. It was the exact midpoint between two magnetic pulses recorded globally during solar flare peaks, and every known spiral event has occurred during or shortly after such disturbances. Analysts theorized that the spiral may be tethered to more than psychology, that it might anchor itself through environmental variables, EM shifts, memory susceptibility, even circadian rhythms. Meaning the spiral wasn't just spiritual or psychological, it was biological, an echo riding waves of biology and electricity, waiting for the mind to open just wide enough to let it in. It was during this wave of discoveries that another survivor emerged, a woman, 38, who claimed to have survived a Zeta rehearsal in 1992. She'd lived off-grid since 2000. Her name withheld for safety. She described waking up in a locked room with 9 other children. They were told they had won a contest, that their parents would come get them after the game. The game, she said, was simple. Follow the voice. Sit when told. Speak only when spoken to. If you disobeyed, the room got colder. If you cried, the lights dimmed. One child tried to leave through a side door. He disappeared. She never saw him again. Her role had been the ghost. She was instructed not to speak, not to be noticed. Her reward for silence? Survival. She said she was released after 41 hours, told it was a test, told she'd done well. She had nightmares for 20 years before she recognized the chair again in a painting her daughter brought home from school. 10 dots. 1 spiral. The black chair at the edge. When she asked her daughter what it was, the girl only shrugged and said, "A place we go when no one's watching." That phrase was found in a marginal note on one of the earliest spiral documents. A line from an erased briefing. The threshold is best crossed in silence, when no one's watching. Threshold. A door. A transition. The moment the spiral takes hold. Which brings us back to Eliza. She remains missing. No confirmed sightings, but the handwriting on the mirror, the audio clips, the hidden messages all point to one conclusion. Eliza is still watching. And if she truly is the anchor, the one meant to hold the door shut, then her absence might not be a failure. It might be resistance. A last line of defense. Because the spiral doesn't need everyone. Just 10. But if even one refuses, the circle cannot close. And if it cannot close, it cannot begin again. But refusal comes at a cost. Those who resist often vanish. Or worse, become part of the background noise, visible only in glimpses, flickers between frames, shadows in mirror reflections, like someone waiting for their turn, even if it never comes. The shadows first appeared in photographs, in corners, barely visible, children seated in circles where none were staged, reflections showing one more figure than present. A family photo taken in 1998 was recently re-examined when their daughter, now grown, noticed something strange. Behind the table, between the curtains, there was a child no one remembered. Wearing a cone-shaped birthday hat, eyes looking directly into the camera. When the image was run through depth analysis, it revealed no pixel distortion. The figure was not edited in. It had been there, physically. But no one at the party remembered seeing them. The hat was yellow. That detail repeated again and again in subsequent sightings. Yellow hat, gray walls, silence. A school portrait background glitching to resemble room theta. A store display of party supplies, misarranged into 10 color-coded chairs. Even in dreams reported by completely disconnected individuals, the same phrase returned, "I waited, I saw, I forgot." These weren't hallucinations. They were coordinates in a language of recurrence. The spiral speaks in patterns, and those who've heard it once begin to see it everywhere. A map of memory etched into the background noise of everyday life. One audio engineer reported faint whispers behind a music track he was mastering. Slowed down, the whisper repeated the name Eliza in 3 different voices. None matched any of the known recordings. But one of them laughed. Soft, almost kind. That laugh was traced through other pieces of media, news broadcasts, game shows, even security camera feeds. It was always there, subtle, slightly warped, but unmistakable. It was becoming part of the infrastructure, embedded in everything, not because it had been placed there, but because the spiral had learned how to replicate itself through recognition. If you recognized it, it grew. If you feared it, it stayed. If you followed it, you completed the loop. The loop, originally thought to be a simple obedience exercise, was now understood as a mechanism of containment. The spiral wanted to be observed, because observation allowed it to tether itself to something tangible. A name, a face, a memory. Once tethered, it remained dormant until all 10 fragments aligned, until a circle was unconsciously completed. And then the game resumed. At the center of this theory was one final, unreleased tape, found not in a vault or a secret archive, but in a used bookstore in Missouri, sold as part of a box of vintage children's media, labeled only with a number, 0, not part of the known 10. A prelude. The tape began with a dark room, no sound. Then a light flickered. A child walked into frame. Not one of the missing. Not one of the actors. A new face. The child sat in the black chair and looked directly at the camera, and then said something never before recorded. "I made the circle." Analysts froze the footage. Facial recognition ran blank. The clothes were timeless. The timestamp was blank. The voice, unregistered. The spiral, it seemed, had introduced a new variable. A narrator. A creator. Or worse, a recruiter. The one who starts the game. Who sets the chairs. Who opens the door from the inside. The idea of a spiral prime, a figure or force responsible for the very first cycle, became a subject of intense debate. But the more pressing concern was this. If there was a 0, and the game had begun before the 1994 party, how many circles had already been completed? How many black chairs had been filled? And how many more were waiting? The loop had grown so large, so layered, that even those outside the original case, analysts, viewers, and civilians, were now pieces in the machinery. Whether through empathy, curiosity, or exposure, the spiral was now part of their story. And stories, as one agent wrote, are the most dangerous form of memory, because they demand retelling. They beg for participation. And once you begin telling a spiral story, you've already taken a seat. The Bureau's latest internal memo warned of narrative cross-contamination. In plain terms, those who document the spiral are unknowingly extending it. A YouTuber releases a reenactment. A listener retells the birthday party story. A viewer imagines the chairs. Each act draws a new circle, and when 10 are drawn, the game knows. It watches. It assigns. It opens. Every witness becomes a window, the memo said, and the spiral only needs one door. But doors work both ways. The final portion of the unreleased tape showed a hallway never seen before, different from the clean white corridor at the end of the 1994 footage. This one was crooked, organic. The walls pulsed. The light flickered like breath. The child in the black chair stood and walked toward it. No hesitation, no fear. As they disappeared into the light, their voice echoed, "We'll need more rooms, more circles, more chairs." It was no longer about one case, no longer about 10 missing kids. The spiral had scaled, gone modular, viral, mimetic, and there was no stopping it, because there was no center to destroy, just the pattern. And the pattern remembers everyone who has ever sat down. The last person to see Eliza may never have known it. A hotel concierge in Denver reported a quiet woman in her early 30s checking in under the name Liza G. Stone. She requested a corner room, paid in cash. No luggage. When asked for ID, she smiled and slid across a folded piece of paper. Written on it, "There are 9 others. They're waiting." She stayed for 3 nights, never left the room. Staff noted the faint sound of music coming from her floor in the early hours. Soft, warbled, and repetitive. Housekeeping found the room empty on the 4th day. The only item left behind was a Polaroid photograph placed on the desk. 10 children, one black chair, a door open in the background, no faces visible. But the timestamp had a date from the future July 17, 2025, the exact anniversary of the original party. The image was tested, not doctored, no tampering. It should not exist. Unless the spiral, as some now believe, is operating outside of linear time. What if each circle isn't a sequel, but a layer? A simultaneous performance on different stages, in different minds, each slightly out of sync but always converging on the same final moment. The door opening, the black chair being filled, and the next voice saying the words, "I will follow the circle. The Bureau can't stop it. Not anymore. All containment has failed." The signals continue to surface. Videos, images, stories. Each one completing another spiral, building more rooms, assigning new roles. Because now the game doesn't need tapes or rooms, it just needs memory. Yours and mine. And the moment you hear the words, the moment you wonder if you've heard them before you have, that's how memory works in the spiral. It doesn't give, it returns. And those who try to forget find themselves back at the table, the cake half cut, the candles burning even after breath, the children gathered not to celebrate, but to wait for one more. For the 10th, for the final piece that will make the memory whole. One agent who'd spent his life chasing the spiral left behind a journal. On its final page, he wrote, "I was so sure I was an investigator. But now I think I was just the narrator. And maybe that was my role all along, to tell the story so the game could begin again. Because someone has to tell the story. Someone always does. The observer, the recorder, the anchor, and maybe the moderator." And if you've listened this far, if the hairs on your arm are standing up, if your mind has circled back once or twice during this story, wondering where you've heard this before, then the spiral is already working. And you already have a chair. The only question left is, which one? And when the candles are lit again, and the circle forms one more time, you'll remember the rules. You'll hear the voice. You'll feel the air still. And you'll know, without a doubt, that it's your turn. If you want to follow more stories like this, stories that peel back the layers between memory, myth, and something much darker, subscribe now. Just know, once you've entered the circle, some stories won't let you leave. Do you want to play again?